Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Moore. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is just over a week till the start of spring football in Columbus, Ohio, which means it's going great. We have to start wrapping up our pre-spring coverage, and you have more concerns. I have a chisel. Let's make this magic happen.
I do have some concerns. I guess call me OSHA. I have safety concerns around the Ohio State Buckeye football team. And for one, I don't like it when people put ladders on top of like bricks and things like that. The ladders need to be on the ground and somebody preferably holding the ladder. Also, no ladders on people. That is a strict no-no. But Tom, I do want to talk about my safety concerns for the Ohio State Buckeyes as well. And the number one concern, I'm starting to think Caleb Downs isn't coming back. He continues to go through these motions with the NFL draft, and I'm wondering if this might be real. So my number one concern is that Caleb Downs is gone, and that's a big hole to fill. Now, nobody should ever feel like, well, now we've got to find somebody to fill this Caleb Downs hole. Like Caleb Downs has dug the hole, basically, right? And that's his own doing. And you can't expect anybody to come and fill that. That's just you just got to move yards, right? Now you just get a new yard and you let the safeties do what they want to do. But number one, you lose, some would say, the best defensive player in the country. So right away, boy, that's a concern. That doesn't mean your defense is gonna, fall to the middle of the pack in the Big Ten or the nation. But it's been a nice luxury to have, and so you lose that luxury, and now you're back to, I don't know, driving whatever, and I'll just continue to throw all these different metaphors out. Now you got a day-to-day station wagon or whatever. It does the job, right? But boy, it sure was nice driving around that Caleb Downs mobile for 2 years.
Yeah, that was so if I have your metaphor straight, OSHA is
Mhm.
concerned about a station wagon in a very large hole.
Yeah.
That's I could not have said it better or more coherently myself, so well done. Yeah, I think you have to kind of separate two things. Number one, Caleb Downses do not come around very often. Caleb Downs caliber safeties you have to go back at least, I would say, a decade to have a Caleb Downs
Mhm.
kind of caliber safety in Malik Hooker, who, did things in a different way than Caleb Downs did, but definitely was as impactful a safety. Those are not guys you're going to have every year. And I think what you said, one of the things that you said that did make sense was the fact that he's a luxury. You don't have the luxury of replacing Caleb Downs with another Caleb Downs. So that sort of freed things up in other areas of the defense, maybe where you can maybe be a little more aggressive because you knew Caleb Downs was there, or you could put Caleb Downs in a spot and just know if he's in a spot to make the tackle, he is going to make the tackle because he does not miss tackles. So it potentially, you're not going to replace him, but Ohio State has had very good defenses with safeties who were not Caleb Downs over the last, in the interim between Malik Hooker and Caleb Downs. So, you have Terry Moore who comes in from Duke. And I think, there are broadly are going to be expectations of a good, solid season of play from Terry Moore at that one of those safety spots. But he's not going to be Caleb Downs. And I think everyone knows that.
It's a little bit like if you were expecting it to be Caleb Downs and you get complacent, you complain about it. It's like what Patrick Ewing said many, many years ago about money. It's like, yes, we make a lot of money, but we spend a lot of money. You talk about NBA players. It's like, yes, we had Caleb Downs, but I want Caleb Downs. I want him again, and it's like you can't. It's all gone, and you just got to deal with it, and you move on, and players will be fine. My second concern, Tom, here, and I'm going to include the nickel position in in this group, is that the assumption is that Earl Little is your nickel. He's played there a little bit. He's played there enough to have been experienced, but he was a deep safety last year for Florida State, and granted, team MVP and defensive MVP, and very, very good, and second team All ACC, and 76 tackles, 4 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, a couple of tackles for loss, like all of these things that all look very, very good. But can he hold up as Ohio State's nickel? And the thing is, when you're very good, like I'll say Lorenzo Styles Jr. was very good last year. When he wasn't out there, things went poorly. And even when he was out there, some of the big plays given up were by the nickel position. And shoot, you could say in terms of the pass plays, 40% of the big plays were against the nickel, 40% of the eight, like, big number. But that's a position that, depending on what the other two corners look like and where the safety help is, you attack it. And so we saw how eagerly quarterbacks would attack either Lorenzo Styles Jr. or Devin Sanchez at times. So Earl Little, until I see it, I think there's going to be a concern of, can he handle this position? And also, how is it that that position is going to operate, I guess, this year, maybe a little bit differently than last year? Because basically you've got two different kinds of players in Lorenzo Styles and Earl Little, even though Lorenzo Styles worked out with the safeties at the combine rather than the cornerbacks, which I think is a little interesting.
Yeah, and this is kind of the flip side of the last conversation. Lorenzo Styles, obviously the combine testing and the speed and all that. Yes, he was an elite speed player, fastest combine time ever in the 40 for an Ohio State player. But he was not a Caleb Downs type impact player at nickel, and part of that was probably that he was banged up, and you definitely saw the drop off when he went out of the game, where teams would find the true freshman in his place and go right after him. This is, I think the fact that they're bringing in Earl Little does not have to replace a Caleb Downs type player at nickel, but he's going to replace a really solid player. I think this is, you're not asking him to do nearly as much as you're, potentially looking at asking Terry Moore to do in the Caleb Downs kind of spot. But I think it's also a reasonable question. He's not going to, Earl Little, we have not seen Earl Little in person, so I don't want to make too many real, specific prognostications on exactly what he's going to do, but I think it's probably fair to guess he will, there's a pretty decent chance he's not going to run the fastest 40 in the history of Ohio State football players at the combine. So, that you're going to have a little bit of potentially a step back speed wise, but he's got some experience. He's got plenty of experience there. He's done a bunch of stuff. And I feel like every time we have these, nickel and safety conversations, we have to have the same kind of caveat, which is, these are not, just because you're the guy who is the nickel does not mean you're actually playing the nickel every single time. They mix and match the responsibilities for these different guys. So he's not going to be in that role all the time. So yes, it's a little bit different than what he did at Florida State at times, but he's going to be asked to do a little bit of everything. So, I don't view this as a concern. It's a little bit of a question because you're plugging in a new player. But I don't know that this is a concern as much as a, let's see it, and then we can maybe check the box there and move on to something else.
And I mean, there will be times where he kind of does have to be the Caleb Downs of it, because Caleb Downs would at times be in the nickel. But I kind of view these concerns, and I'll get to the third one here in a second, a little bit like the defensive tackle concerns, which over the course of the show, it's like, well, I don't know if that's really a concern. And well, we've got a show that we've got to do, Tom. So please be a little bit more concerned. But I really am high on what these Ohio State safeties starting three will be this year, which, Tom, takes me to the third concern here, and that is the lack of depth and lack of experience behind what we assume the top three of Jalen McClain and Terry Moore and Earl Little will be. We don't even necessarily know who the backup nickel will be. I think we've both thrown our hats in the Jay Timmons ring, who is a true freshman. But he's not even really in the discussion here with the with the safeties overall, when you're talking, we haven't seen anything from Deshaun Stewart, who was injured last year as a true freshman. Last year as a redshirt freshman, Leroy Roker played in 8 games on defense. Only played in any of the final 3 games because Lorenzo Styles Jr. got hurt, so that moved everybody up a spot and moved him from 7th to 6th, and then he became the dime. So it's those 2 guys, and it's Blaine Bradford, it's Simeon Caldwell, and Caden Gebhard, who are all true freshmen. So if one of those guys starters go down, your most experienced guys are Deshaun Stewart, who redshirted, and Leroy Roker, who I think played enough to be he's the next guy in, and I would think. But just because he's played enough, I don't know if that means that he's good enough. And so I just think there's a lot of questions behind the top 3, and Ohio State's no different than that in that. And coaches will tell you that it's hard to have depth anymore. And that all being said, I mean, shoot, I think Blaine Bradford, I'm very high on him. I think he's going to be in a 2 deep. We've talked all winter long about Jay Timmons. So even this concern, it's like it's real, but I still like some of the options.
Well, if you go through other teams that are sort of in the top 10 kind of range entering the season, I think this is the kind of concern that a lot of them would love to have. That, if one of your concerns at safety is like, well, if someone gets hurt, then you probably have to plug in someone else, and you have some really potentially talented true freshman options, which you'd love to have. You'd love to have another, if they had Bryce West back, you'd probably feel a little bit better about things at nickel. But you have talented true freshmen, and you have Leroy Roker. I think we're going to do a show at some point coming up about guys who this is the biggest spring for. And I think Leroy Roker is probably on that list somewhere because he is sort of the next man up. At least entering the spring, I would view him as sort of the next man up among that safety rotation without having seen Deshaun Stewart really at all last year. I would guess Roker's in that spot. It's a big spring for Deshaun Stewart too, because you don't ever want to have to throw a true freshman in there. If a true freshman comes in like Devin Sanchez and earns a spot, great, fantastic. That's great. You don't want to have to throw a true freshman in there. And I think Blaine Bradford and Jay Timmons are definitely 2 guys who I am watching and expecting potentially to be in the mix for this conversation this year. But you don't want to have to throw those guys in. If they're ready, great, by all means. But you really would love, I think Matt Guerrero would love to have Leroy Roker or Deshaun Stewart, one of the guys coming back, just show, okay, there's been some real tangible progress here where you're going into the spring and you're showing you're ready to be, in your circle of trust there among the safeties, because there are, outside of Jalen McClain, there's no one who's back who's played a ton of reps back there at Ohio State. So you have varying degrees of questions, and I think they have answers on this roster, and I think they potentially have multiple good answers on this roster because they brought a couple guys in the portal, and they brought in a couple talented true freshmen. You've got a couple guys back who, could potentially take that next step. And this is one of these things where we've talked about this in other contexts around the field as we go through these different shows. You don't need all of these guys to hit. You just need a couple of these guys to hit. So if you go 2 for 6 among the guys we're sort of talking about here, 2 for 5, something like that, you're not in a bad shape.
And my initial third one, which I'm really high on Terry Moore, and I have some high expectations, but it's like, will there be any rust? And the last time he played was the bowl game in the 2024 season. I don't know that I'm concerned, though. It's not a legitimate concern, like, ooh, rust in the spring. Oh no, what will we ever do? But I think from the sounds of it, there's no rust in terms of where he is right now with the Buckeyes. It sounds like he's picked up things very, very well and is already living up to the expectations that people had for him.
Yeah, and just to sort of put this in time for people, he got hurt basically I don't know if it was the exact same day, but it was around the week of when Ohio State played Oregon in the Rose Bowl. That feels like quite a while ago. So,
Jeez.
a lot has happened between then and now. So yeah, I am fully expecting him, between this being a new school, new defense, the fact that he didn't play last year. I am expecting there to be a little bit of rust there. I would also expect there to, him to be someone who, between the first day of spring practice and practice 15 at the spring game, I expect him to be someone who probably takes a pretty big step forward, because yeah, you're going to be a little behind entering spring ball, just for all the, for all the obvious reasons. But if he is what we sort of expect him to be, the rust should get knocked off over those 15 practices, and he should be, take a substantial step forward over that span of 6 weeks.
Yeah, I would agree. So there you go. 3 humongous concerns for the Ohio State safeties. No bigger concerns ever, arguably. And, are they real concerns? They are real concerns, but as with a program like Ohio State, there should always be some answers, and there are. So, um, but those answers have to stay healthy and stay productive, and all of that, as you know. So there you go. Just some thoughts on the safeties. Boy, as Tom said, spring football is right around the corner, as are the everything that goes with it, the availabilities, the interviews, the opportunities to watch practice. We are expecting to be there on the 10th and possibly the 12th when spring practice opens. And of course, now is a good time to subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so, because once spring practice opens, we'll be doing as much as we can. Not that we haven't already, but real live spring camp in action. We'll give you everything that we've got. So that will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.